Hello, everyone. We're going to give everybody just one more minute to join. All right, let's get going. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Bear. I'm the Rural Prosperity Manager with the Colorado Resiliency Office. And I am really excited for this panel today. So we have panelists representing a whole facets from kind of the economic development perspective who are going to share some of the climate action strategies within their realm. I'm excited about this panel because we have people representing education, Elizabeth Harbaugh from Malira. We have our Mainstreet program, Larry Lucas, who's going to talk about how they're thinking about their heritage energy program across downtown cores. We have Emma and Sean from Eco Action Partners, who are going to talk about the business end and some strategies that they're working with, especially in the Telluride and San Miguel area. And then we have Jude Schunemeyer from the Montezuma Orchard Project, who's going to touch on a little bit of the industry perspective. They're working on the heritage apple industry and revitalizing that in that corner of the world. I love this project. I'm sure Jude will mention this, but they've found some apples that were thought to be extinct and are bringing them back. It's very cool. I like to talk about apples, so excited that Jude's here. So with that, you're going to get about a 10-minute overview from each one of our panelists, and then we will have a chance for question and answer at the end. So hold on to those. You're free to put them in the chat as we go, and we will hit those when everyone has had a chance to speak. So we are going to kick it off with our own Larry Lucas from the Mainstreet program. Larry, I'm handing it over.
Thanks, Kate. All right, so my name is Larry Lucas. I'm a licensed architect in Colorado, and I serve as the Mainstreet architect for our program. Colorado Mainstreet is part of a national movement of about 46 states that have Mainstreet programs. It started in 1980 by the National Trust in an effort to revitalize downtown areas that were starting to fall into disinvestment. Currently, we have 25 officially designated communities that we actually have an MOU through DOLA and the actual municipality with. And then 67 other communities have expressed interest. So we work with downtown property owners, local governments, and really just anyone downtown to leave a lasting legacy through historic preservation, public improvements, and economic development. Next. Heritage energy is a strategy that we came up to assist rural commercial property owners to better reinvest in their properties. Really, the heritage and the energy is historic preservation and then environmental conservation. So we found that actually by following preservation and energy efficiency standards and guidelines and best practices, that building and business owners can access multiple streams of funding that can be leveraged together, kind of in the end goal of leveraging a larger preservation tax credit, which anything that goes into the building, you can actually claim a tax credit on for the state and the national ones. Okay, next. Okay, so existing buildings, this is important. I mean, our downtown historic buildings, they've obviously been there for a long time. We need to realize first, though, that most buildings, or all of our buildings in the United States, use about 40 to 50% of the total energy consumed. And then on an average year, new construction and major renovations like a gut rehab actually only accounts for 1 to 3% of the total building stock. So yeah, our downtown buildings are important for saving energy, especially when we think about in 2050, that 80% of our population will still be living and working in today's buildings. Next. A cool thing to think about too is that in these Main Street style buildings, the National Trust did a study, and they found that you can save between 27 and 59%, depending on the building type. Restaurants may be different than retail, for example, in the energy utilization. But across the board, if we do the work that we can do kind of as a bottom end, this can yield a 17% energy reduction demand in the commercial building sector. And the small neighborhood businesses like restaurants, grocers, and retailers can improve profitability by more than 10% through investing wisely in energy efficiency retrofit work. This is important because if you think about our rural communities, really the lease per square foot per year is often less than it is in big markets like Denver or something like that. So if we're saving 10% on our utility bills in a small market, it makes a bigger impact per square foot per year in our cost for our bottom line for our space. So we actually see that these kinds of incentives are, really make a difference in small towns. Next. Okay, so really, what's the gist of this? Like, why do small towns need a little bit more assistance? Well, we found that, small businesses are just hard to reach. They don't know about energy efficiency incentives. I mean, even through their utility provider most of the time, they don't take them up on it because they see these kinds of things. And preservation, for example, it's a little bit even harder to achieve. You have to have somebody really help guide you and explain to you and educate you that these things are even available. And they see their baby as their business. It's their nest egg. They have a building. They take care of it as best they can. But they don't really have time to pursue this, and it's confusing. So that's where we actually step in with a Heritage Energy program, and we formed a team called the HELP Team, the Heritage Energy Leadership Partner Team, and we partner with History Colorado and the Colorado Energy Office, and then us, DOLA Main Street, to essentially form a team. When incentives come about, we actually work together to figure out the best way to leverage those things together to end up with the best result for the property owners. Next. So we had this program that kicked off in 2021 that was a response to COVID, and it was stimulant grant money that we had that was given to Main Street to administer, and we had a really big reception for this. There was only going to be a 20% match, and projects could go up to $150,000 per business. In the end, we actually received applications, and each community would submit maybe several buildings or people that were interested, and then we picked the top communities based on their application typically, and then also the kinds of work they were going to do. There were 16 communities and 95 buildings in the end that were rehabbed or improved through the money that we had received. Good examples of this: energy would be like HVAC systems, hot water, roofs, windows, doors. And facade improvements would be restoration of a facade, paint, awning, signage, etc. So that really the grant paid for those two things. It was really about improving the business, like getting more people in the door and then saving money on the bottom line. So I think the most important thing in this Heritage Energy approach is that you focus on quality preservation. Only 18, but 18 is a pretty big number out of 95 were designated on the state and national register. And so those automatically can qualify for the federal and state tax credits. So that was great. And those are the ones that we really focused in on when we were doing our work and extra reviews and things with History Colorado. Next. All right, now some stats. And you are going to get these slides later. Jimmy told you she'd be sending them out. But I'm going to hit some of the high point numbers, what happened with this 6.7 million. So in the 95 businesses that we had that reported, there was an increase in 25% in sales, which is huge, right? Now we're coming out of COVID at this time too, because we tracked pre-COVID numbers, 2019, and compared that to post-COVID numbers kind of in 2022. Things are still rebounding, but still, our Main Streets did actually really well because a lot of people shopping locally and things. It's cool that 45% of the businesses reported an increase in sales of 15% or more. An additional 4.3 was invested. An additional 4.3 million was invested in the buildings receiving funding, and that's more than the 20% match. So it's like they start seeing things happen and they want to even make it better, and that really helps the downtown's vibrancy overall. And then jobs increased 20% across all businesses reporting. Next slide. Sales tax increased 47% in the communities where we were able to get that information. And then public investment, In the project was about 1.9 million through some other incentive grants and things that could be used for matching funds and things like that that the property owners took advantage of. And then also there was an additional 7.7 million spent, which is double what the grant was by just the local business owners on their buildings. So for every $1 invested, there was a $2.26 ROI invested, if you call it that, in these properties. Next slide. The one that seems it seems like a low number, and it kind of is, was energy efficiency. Now, the reason we didn't have a huge reduction in energy was mainly due to the fact that most folks wanted help with their buildings. They focused in on the preservation aspect of heritage energy with this. They, and rightly so, because we see how it got more people in the doors and things that actually help the business's bottom line. But there were some projects that really went above and beyond and did things like renewable energy. I'll show you some of those. This one was on the roof of a building in Silverton. And improve things like lighting. There were a couple hotels or motel that actually, replaced all those through wall air conditioning units, and they're saving a ton of money. But this is an across the board number for the 36 that we actually had utility data from 2019 to 2020, and then 2022 to 23 is when we tracked this, and this is a differential. And again, it's not exactly what we hoped, but a lot of the money, majority of the money was spent on physical improvements. So we think that doing, a good upfront energy audit and actually following that process with a building, if we actually had programs specifically focused on energy, we would see a big increase in or big decrease in utility bills. Next slide. Just want to run through real quick and show you some businesses. This is the Flying Dutchman. It's a Quonset structure. It's a mechanic shop in Hugo. Beautiful sign that lights up at night and new awnings. Next slide. Granby. This is really just a remodel of a storefront, and tremendous impact. It just really stands out the way the colors were selected and things like that. Next slide. This is a solar installation in Mancus at a natural food store that I believe their intent was to go net zero with this. Next slide. In Windsor, there was a storefront remodel and awnings and energy efficiency work done to this yarn shop, which is a darling building, and it looks fantastic. Next slide. In Mancus, we saw a complete restoration of an original storefront facade where it had been bricked in for their historic opera house, and it's just an incredible addition to downtown. Next slide. And then in Leadville, a restoration of a historic newspaper building. It really needed a lot. It had been painted one solid mint green color, and this is the outfall of what happened with our money. Next slide. So with successful, healthy, and resilient buildings, building a legacy through physical places, and mainly the energy savings is through avoided impact. So it saves carbon impact and also energy. And then projects add local labor and improve vitality of the downtown tax base. That's the success. And really, next slide, really the only downsides that we would have, our current hurdles, is we need more money for energy efficiency work. There's a shortfall in that. Lots of people want to do this work. There's just not much available. But hey, we're ready to be nimble whenever the opportunity presents itself, and the help team is kind of here to go. So we're just waiting kind of in the wings, but things do come along periodically. So we're excited to work on the next thing. Thanks very much. Next slide.
Thank you, Larry. All right, we are now going to hand it to Jude Schunemeyer with the Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project. Jude, take it away.
Kate. Thank you. Thanks for having me here today. Montezuma Orchard Restoration Project, MORP as we become known, started a little bit over 20 years unofficially, a bit over 20 years ago unofficially. Addie and I had been doing wildfire on hotshot crews and knew we were going to keep doing that forever. And on a whim, we leased out a little neighborhood nursery that had been in Cortez for over 50 years. With the nursery, we inherited a lot of the clientele that went with the nursery and had been there for years. And these folks would tell us stories of their grandparents' orchards and the fruit industry. They'd give us copies of county fair records from the early 1900s and articles that some of the prominent fruit growers had written in the Montezuma Journal, some even back into the 1890s. And over time, we realized that this was more than just homestead orchards, that this was actually a foundational part of Montezuma County when it started after we pushed the Utes out of here. That this was a real economy that happened here, and across Montezuma County there were still a lot of the old trees around. Next slide, please. We also realized that this didn't happen in a bubble, that Colorado had orchards across it. These were some of the most foundational industries in Colorado as well. When the miners came out and started in 1849, 1850 there, with the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, they needed to eat, and it was wagon trains. Up until the train came in 1870, it was wagon trains that were supplying a lot of provisions to Denver and to the cities of the Front Range. So right away, people started planting orchards there. The history of orchards has become so forgotten now that even History Colorado had a hard time believing that there really was a lot of a history to orchards here other than peaches and palisades. So it took us a lot of time to do a lot of documentation to show what was going on. We've documented tree by tree mapping of over 6,000 historic trees, mostly here in Montezuma County. We feel like there's probably 10,000 trees that are 70, 80 years old to 130 years old here in Southwest Colorado. There's other old trees across Colorado that we've documented and tried to find cuttings and regraft and repropagate. This is important because a lot of these varieties that are here in the oldest orchards especially are now considered extinct or functionally extinct. These are trees that we know through DNA were something once prominent, but now even their names have been lost and forgotten. These cultivars and these varieties didn't go extinct because they weren't good and didn't grow well here. They are still growing well here, producing high quality fruit on them. People talk about how Prohibition caused all the orchards to be cut out. That's absolutely not true. It was really codling moth that caused so many of the orchards to be cut out in the 1800s and early 1900s when they came in. Places like Montezuma County that were up higher, cooler nighttime temps still had issues with codling moth, but not as much as the Front Range. On the Front Range, it became so valuable, the real estate was more valuable than growing fruit for the purpose of feeding codling moth. So the orchards started to get cut out, or they were just left in place and trees were planted around them. We feel like these cultivars, these rare cultivars that are here, are going to be the bank for the next generation of 100-year-old orchards. And that's what we're working at preserving all of these cultivars for. Next slide, please. One of the big issues we had was understanding if we want to preserve the old trees and if we want to have people plant new orchards of these older cultivars, we had to develop an economy again. Many of the people that were keeping the trees alive were keeping them alive because they were so tied to their families, and that wasn't going to last forever. And we felt like if we could produce a market for the fruit, it would be able to provide the means to keep the trees alive and to get new trees planted. On an early research trip up to Fort Collins to the CSU archives there, we took the time up the Front Range and stopped at cideries and gave them samples of apples. And along the way, we realized they really didn't want apples, they wanted juice. Apples are more problematic for them to work with and crush and more steps involved. And along the way, we saw information on this mobile cider press, which we were then able to get via LFPP grant. This enables us to take the fruit from these trees and convert it into a value-added product. Right now, this fruit is just going to waste. We estimate there's upwards of 50,000 bushels on a good year that could be harvested here in Southwest Colorado. At 10 cents a pound on the tree, that's a $200,000 a year crop. At 50 cents a pound, that's $1 million a year crop. One of the things we were able to get an LFPP study grant before we got the acquisition grant for the press. And we realized that being mobile is only so mobile. You can't just pull it up into an orchard and start going. There's a lot of HACCP and health code regulations with food manufacturing. So we realized we needed an actual home base to be able to have the press at and to be able to store apples, harvest the apples, store them, and then also have a more of a genetic bank to plant out a living orchard genetic bank for all of these rare cultivars that we were finding. Next slide, please. This led us to buying a 36-acre farm in cooperation with several partners, including the Nature Conservancy. And this part of all of this capital campaign and process was getting the actual facility there. This is what DOLA helped paid for, along with Colorado Water Conservation Board helped to pay for this actual juicing facility, so that we had something that met the health code requirements that we needed to, that we could keep this expensive piece of equipment safe and indoors when it's not being used. It gave us a place to assemble all of the green crates that you see, the bushel crates, the gray bins there. For years, there was nothing, even if you could pick apples, there was nothing to put the apples into. It was old wooden boxes that we were scrounging around an old barn. So we had to build all of the critical infrastructure to rebuild the economy with this. The end result is that we can now produce these boxes of juice. They're 5-liter boxes, pasteurized, shelf stable up to a year, and be able to provide a value-added product for farmers that otherwise were having their crops hit the ground. Next slide, please. A big part of the reason why Nature Conservancy helped us out with this had to do with drought across the Colorado River basin. The Colorado River, as most people are aware of, is badly stressed. It's over-allocated and it's getting to have less water because of prolonged drought. We're in a 20-something year drought cycle down here. Last winter was a good wet winter for us, but we've had less than 2 inches of rain since April probably. So we feel like we're bouncing back into drought again. We feel like that we can plant these old style orchards that are more widely spaced, where the trees can grow up bigger and stronger over time and be passed from generation to generation, just as the old trees were passed forward to us, that we can plant these types of orchards and have the ground underneath them be planted in resilient, drought-tolerant grasses and plants, so that we can create a situation that is drought-resistant and economically feasible. Nature Conservancy was looking for ways of replanting agricultural crops in the upper basins that also took less water. And this is all a learning process here. We believe that we're going to be able to do this and create an agricultural landscape that is drought resistant as well. We're still at the point of breaking a few eggs with this process, so there's a lot of learning going on with this, but we feel like we're sound with what we're doing. Next slide, please. The Orchard Hub itself has become a place where people can come and have classes and events. We do tree sales there. Every fall, we do the Orchard Social. The first Orchard Social started years ago with help from people from the Montezuma County Historic Society, people like Miss June Head, who's no longer with us, who knew everyone and could bring people in and bring people together. We see this as a way, it was always a way of bringing people in and letting them talk about their orchards and talk about trees and see who knew what where, so that we could share that knowledge that was there before it was lost. We would like to see this build over time to where it's an event that people come from Denver, from Albuquerque, from Salt Lake or Phoenix up to buy apples, to buy cider, to experience that the agriculture and the old agriculture of Montezuma County and Montezuma Valley. We know this is a slow building process here, but we really feel like this was a historic part of Montezuma County and of Colorado. We absolutely believe that we can grow some of the best quality fruit ever grown anywhere on earth, and we can do that here in Montezuma County, and we are not willing to let that industry go away. So that's what I've got for you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jude. I love both of these last two projects because they just illustrate for me how place-based this climate action work can be, where it really is just about unifying around things we value already in our communities and building upon them. Very cool examples of that. All right, with that, I'm going to hand this off to Emma and Sean from Eco Action Partners.
Thank you so much. I am Emma Girona. I'm the Executive Director of Eco Action Partners, and as Kate mentioned, joined today by Sean, our Green Business Coordinator. Next slide. Eco Action Partners is a nonprofit. We're based out of Telluride, but we work across San Miguel, Ouray, and San Juan counties. We were originally created by our governments to have a collective sustainability minded office when they didn't have the resources or capacity to create sustainability staff positions in their own governments. So we work really closely with our government entities across the 3 counties to bring together our governments and our community members, businesses, our schools, our events to work together on our collective emissions related goals. So our programming works across 4 areas. The big one is community, empowering and acknowledging our local sustainability actions. We do a lot of the climate action planning for our region and facilitate collaborative goals and actions and programming. We also track the regional greenhouse gas emissions and conduct forecasting so that we can understand the impact that our programming is having on our emissions. And then we run programming across energy and waste. So one of those programs is our Green Business Program, which we'll talk about today. We also have a residential weatherization program, and then support events and festivals and our residents with their waste in this region. Next slide. So a big part of this, as I mentioned, is our climate action planning. In 2021, we developed our new climate action plan, meant to be a working roadmap towards our sustainability goals, and is looking at the next decade of action over 8 sectors. It's meant to be a measurable and target-oriented plan, and we're exploring actions that not only reduce our emissions, but also help to promote equity, foster economic sustainability, improve our environmental quality, enhance public health and safety, and build resilience for our community. So we're really looking at holistic actions that move us towards a more sustainable future for our communities as a whole. Next slide. This is based on our emissions inventory we've been tracking since 2010. This is our 2020 pie chart for Uray and San Miguel counties. And I just wanted to point out the blue section on the right there that is our building energy use. It's 28% residential and 17% commercial. So our building use is really a big portion of our emissions and leads to a lot of the programming and actions that we're trying to get into place from Eco Action Partners. Next. So with that, one of the main actions in our climate action plan is to host a green business program. And the program, I will let Sean talk a little bit more about how it works, but our main goals are reducing emissions, but also, as I mentioned, supporting economic development. And that looks like reducing utility bills. Larry was talking about a bit of this with the Mainstreet program, but being able to put money back in our business owners' pockets through efficiency efforts so that they can continue to run successful businesses. We also think it's really important to have equitable access to our sustainability programming. We understand how busy these business owners can be and often understaffed and don't have a lot of time. And we want to make sure that the rebates and incentives that are out there are available to everybody. And we're trying to cultivate a sustainability-centered business culture and encourage collaboration and community building. So bringing all of our businesses together so that we can talk about the challenges that we're collectively facing as rural community members and how we can support each other in reaching our goals. Next slide. And with that, I will pass it to Sean to talk about how the program itself works.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, thanks, Emma. Appreciate that. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here at this seminar. We're excited to present to you guys today. Yeah, our Green Business membership program is, I like to consider it an outreach program to the commercial sector, and we try to bring them, all the benefits we can from sustainable practices and reducing their energy use, reducing their waste generation, and then also providing them with extra information that might fulfill some of their goals on sustainability. And so you can see on this slide, we've got a variety of benefits here. I'll just hit a couple of them. We like to do an energy assessment for their facility and try to help them just with the low-hanging fruit on energy, advise them on mechanical systems that might be more efficient or how to improve their efficiency. We team with Black Hills Energy and San Miguel Power for other incentivized improvements or boiler insulation, anything that can help these businesses reduce their energy. And then another thing we do is create a sustainability plan with each business. And so we try to collaborate with each business, ask them what their goals are, what are some things they're thinking about in terms of sustainability and environment. And then also take those things, help them find the resources and energy to make those things happen. And then also make suggestions about other things they might not have any idea about, whether it's LED light bulbs or sourcing their products from some other sustainable businesses or industries, And so, yeah, those are some things. We also do a roundtable event. We host an event where we try to get our green businesses all in the same place at the same time to chat and have lunch and talk about sustainability. Always a good time, and a good way to generate connections between the businesses on that front. And then next slide, please. So yeah, the way it works is we do have like an annual fee of $120 for each business, just to try to kind of have a sustaining membership, kind of like Colorado Public Radio or something like that, and generate a little bit of revenue, and then also return that value to these people plus, multiple times. So anyway, we meet with them, have an onboarding meeting, walk through their facility, bring along some of our other partners that can do energy assessments and suggestions, offer rebates. BHE offers, rebates, and creates their own little report, setting goals. And then from there, we do try to help the businesses access rebates and incentives for improvements to their, their physical property. Weatherization resources are things we provide. And then also, we have a lot of, you'll see in one of my last slides that I have all my green businesses logos. And so we have a diverse group of businesses that we've recruited. And so I've worked with schools, they become a green business member. I help them plug in sustainability, recycling, energy projects, and just education with their students and give them the resources, and the teachers teach the stuff. We also have another program that Eco Action Partners has an in-school education program as well. But anyway, we try to source compost resources. We have a couple local compost businesses that pick up compost for restaurants and such. And we also are starting a large building benchmarking project, which another one of our colleagues is spearheading. Should be interesting to see where that goes. We make newsletters. Yeah, let's do next slide. And here are some of my green business members. And so there's a pretty large diversity of people that get involved. And what this leads, and we're always trying to build a better airplane as we fly it. So with each one of these businesses, we have a different goal sets, have different mindsets in terms of sustainability, different profiles of businesses and what their enterprise is. But then what I like to try to do is consolidate those actions that we provided, say for Jagged Edge mountaineering store, and connect that with alternative power enterprises, which is a solar installer, and then I have two businesses. I have a Skull Studio in design, and they're building a new facility for their metal fabrication, and then trying to connect them with Grizzly Air, who's an HVAC system that can provide them with some heat pumps. And then also trying to keep with a newsletter to keep these businesses aware of who's doing what's going on. And so, yeah, it's neat to kind of gather and continue to get a playbook of different resources for these different businesses, across this across this commercial sector. And let's do the last slide here. And yeah, here's two different slides that we put out for social media. And what we did here was, we're going to put this on our social media post with, it's not the most giant, social media platform, but we do have some good reach. So anyway, here's, welcome to Public Library. And so they did some interesting stuff with their HVAC programming system. They just went back and they had a pretty clever mechanical guy go back and reprogram all their heating sections. And then he also did a bunch of repairs on the heaters because a bunch of heaters were stuck open. And so they saved a lot of energy. They could just see their energy bill just, drop after getting this program and kind of remodel on their heating system. And then they are also a totally green member with San Miguel Power, which contributes to local renewable energy and green investments. And so we came up with a number on this of how much money they've been saving. It was kind of cool to show that. It's a big building, right? Wilkinson Public Libraries, I don't know how many, 10, 20,000 square feet or maybe 15,000 square feet, it's an estimate. And then here's Jagged Edge. Jagged Edge, very enthusiastic about their sustainability practices. And they do have a solar system on their roof. They have hundreds of lights. They replaced a bunch of lights with LED bulbs. They're using a programmable thermostat. They went back and with the help of Black Hills Energy, insulated all their boiler piping, and Black Hills Energy did that for free. And so then they were also, you can see we made this little diagram of 3 vehicles, being driven for a year. It's kind of an equivalent carbon offset for what they were doing. So, yeah, that's our story where it stands right now. We're continuing to try to build our reach out broader into the community, different types of businesses, different members of our communities, kind of part of our outreach goals this time. And yeah, happy to take questions after we're done. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean and Emma. Plus, Jagged Edge is a really great outdoor gear place. So if you're in Telluride, check it out. Good companies doing good things. We know that's becoming a part of branding these days. Yes, as a reminder, all attendees, please put any questions you have as they come up for you in the chat, and we'll answer them after. So now we're going to go ahead and hand it over to Elizabeth Harbaugh with LIRA.
Hi, everyone. As Kate just said, I'm Elizabeth Harbaugh. I'm the Director of Climatarium with LIRA, Colorado. Next slide. So LIRA is a intentionally small nonprofit based out of Denver, but we work statewide. And really, we come at education problems thinking about, like many of the other partners in this room, how we can really accelerate the work that communities, especially rural communities, are already doing. So rather than coming into education work with a set program or curriculum, we are really here with a lot of different strategies to really support the on-the-ground impact that these that education initiatives can have, and to help support the capacity in rural regions to really rethink their education systems and figure out how to be innovative and transformative with students at the center of that, thinking about what opportunities we can provide for students in the long run. Next slide. And so from that, overarching umbrella comes our program Climatarium. So Climatarium really comes at the intersection of climate change and education for us. And our vision is that the next generation of students across Colorado, and ideally, nationwide at some point, are prepared and empowered around the impacts of climate change, knowing that we think of this both in terms of the economic and environmental sustainability of regions, and starting with how do we ensure that the next generation is resilient on themselves, both social and emotionally, and then also thinking about what their job outcomes are. So we currently work in 5 regions around the state. We focus on rural because we recognize that the rural regions in Colorado are experiencing the impacts of climate change at a fast rate, and we're in an era where there's limited resources for education. So we partner with K-12 districts in order to rethink how they can, address the impacts of climate change through education and support their students in this. And next slide. So what this looks like, we support rural collaboration between school districts. So we come together with multiple K-12 school districts in a region, usually targeting those small rural districts because we know that they have the most limited resources. We also come together with higher education entities and then industry in the region. And our belief really in this is that sharing resources really leads to those economies of scale and greater access for those rural students. And when we first bring these partners together, our role is really in building a coalition and helping to determine a local vision. We know that talking about climate change in rural regions can be something that is highly personal. And so we develop a shared language and really a vision for what resiliency means in those regions. And then also a vision for what they want to be true for students. So thinking through what are the student opportunities that we can build from or just build anew in order to really help students understand the opportunities that are available in their regions and help empower them as leaders in climate action. Next slide. And so there's, you know, three parts of this that can look very different because this is community driven in each region that we work with. First, we're passionate about climate education, as I've mentioned multiple times already. So that means looking at the CTE pathways that exist in regions or other pathways that exist in schools, supporting teachers and those closest to students with thinking, how can we continue to innovate around climate education and make everything very community driven as well. So thinking about the place-based nature of this and how can we support regions and understanding what are the resiliency needs that they have and how they can incorporate that into their K-12 programming. A key partner in this also is post-secondary, is post-secondary institutions. So thinking about our institutes of higher education, how they can support concurrent enrollment or other opportunities for students to engage in this. And then a step beyond that, thinking about industry, how we can get better around our messaging with industry on what the green opportunity is in regions, what are the green jobs that we see, maybe not the top jobs today, but the top jobs moving forward. And the final piece of that is youth leadership. We work with a lot of experiential education partners across the state, as well as institutes of higher ed, to build out student leadership opportunities that really are going to enable youth, even if they're not getting all of this in the classroom, to have that hands-on experience in their communities. And we see that as really essential to giving students that power to feel like they can make an impact in their communities, and ideally also see opportunity to stay in their communities for the long term. On the next slide. So I've talked a little bit about our role, but going into some more detail, we currently collaborate with 20 school districts and 8 institutes of higher education across the state around this work, and are constantly expanding and providing thought partnership to multiple other regions in this. We assemble those design teams to really help build out these programs, and then also are that dot connector to help them define the resources and experts they need to come in and build both in-school and out-of-school programs. We also really love to engage educators and students as co-creators in this process, so really building the capacity in communities to, for the long term, hopefully engage those partners in designing their curriculum and experiences. We also work with a number of partners around the state to elevate youth voice and leadership. So our pilot program was actually a program out of Fort Lewis College in Durango, the Environment and Climate Institute, which for 3 years now has had high school students from the region come together to do project-based learning and understand kind of the green opportunity in their region and really build that capacity to be the leaders in environmental education in their region. Beyond that, though, we also are really passionate about moving towards sustainability for our region. So in every region that we work with, we help them to set up a central governing structure that will enable local leadership over these projects for the long term. So they have an intermediary that really is there to connect the dots between all the school districts and higher ed partners, and to start communicating what the youth needs are in the workforce development spectrum. We've also helped these regions come to over $10 million in funding through a lot of state grant programs that have come up around this same work. And then as we move forward, we continue to learn and measure our impact. This is both through the direct work that we do with hubs, and we're passionate about thinking about ways we can codify this at the state level. So we've done a lot of work around thinking about policy that can enable climate education in a sustainable way for regions. And then also working with a lot of state agencies to start codifying when we talk about green jobs, what does that mean? And how can we be really specific in rural communities to communicate the green opportunity and to really start talking about transferable green skills? Our goal is never to come into a region and say you have to reinvent the wheel. We always want to work with communities to say, here's how you can integrate innovative and transformative practices into the programming you already have going. And I think that is all for me, but that's our climatarium model.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We have one specific question in the chat, and then I'm going to ask a broader question of everybody, but I'm going to start with you. The specific question in the chat is, it looked like Uray County was not a participant, and so the question was, had they been reached out to in your effort?
Yeah, right around the time of the Rural Co-Action Grant, we did reach out to Uray County, and we have a number of counties that have been interested in this work, and we're always open to partnership. So I'd say if there is somewhere that feels like they have, you know, an interest in pursuing this work, like happy to connect further and talk about it. But yeah, all of our connections so far with regions have been pretty opportunistic. So when something comes our way, we're always really open to partnering in any way that makes sense for a community.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask a broader question that for all panelists. I'm going to actually start with you, Elizabeth. And one of the things that is coming up for me as I'm listening to you all is, as we all know, a lot of climate action hinges on a shared vision for your community's future and some shared values around how you want to act that aligns with the things that you care about in your community. So I heard you mention, Elizabeth, kind of this piece of you guys spending a lot of time creating that shared vision. So I'm wondering if you could share what makes that successful for you. And I would also just then extend that to the rest of our panelists to talk about how they kind of plugged into a shared vision for their communities. But I'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that that's probably one of the key parts of what we do is thinking about that shared vision. And so I think, you know, especially coming from the Front Range, I think it's really important that we have a lot of like respect and trust in our rural communities and understand that the impacts of climate change are, you know, very real for them, regardless of what language is used. And so we always come into a community first with, you know, probably 2 to 3 meetings of champions in the region who can really talk through, you know, what are the biggest challenges and barriers we're seeing related to climate change in the region? How is that impacting the economy, and how is that impacting the environment and their social way of life as well? So thinking about climate change not only as something that's environmental, but goes beyond that. And a part of that is developing that shared language, finding what feels comfortable for people, knowing that a lot of the regions we work with have to see one another in the grocery store every day. And so it might be different for, you know, us coming in and talking to them about it. And I think it also lays that strong foundation for when we talk about education, often when we say climate change education, people immediately go to environmental science. But when you start talking about really what the impacts of climate change are, we see that it's across industries. So how can we help students to understand that there's transferable skills and knowledge around climate change that can go into any industry, any pathway they're interested in, and impact the community on a much larger scale? Hopefully that answered your question, Kate.
Yeah, thank you. And I open that up to any other panelists who have something around the lines of how you think having kind of a shared vision in your community has enabled some action. Yeah, go ahead, Emma.
Yeah, so we facilitate a group called the Snuffles Energy Board. It's a collaborative board of each of our government representatives and then a number of organizations and our utilities, and meet on a regular basis to talk about exactly this, especially being in a remote region. It can be hard to be on the same page and have the resources to undergo these projects. So a big part of what we're hoping to do with that group is to facilitate that collaboration and that shared vision, because a lot of these programs can't happen without 2 or 3 of our different jurisdictions working together. So it's been really cool to see communities that we have across our region that are very different coming to the table and addressing issues that they might see differently in their communities, but that one program or one project that we can undertake together will help to address. And especially as we're looking at economics and the impact that climate change does have on our economic sphere and on our businesses, there's resources and projects that we can take on together, but it's really getting everyone to the table to discuss that's made a successful plan for us going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on this? Okay, I have a tactical question that I'm actually going to shoot to Jude, because again, we know a lot of action hinges on funding. And I know that Jude has received ready funding from Zola, but also did a really good job, obviously stacking some much bigger sources of funding to fund many phases of your project. So Jude, I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your approach to funding your project.
Yeah, thanks. Our approach is just to try and get funding from any source we can. You know, in Colorado, having said that, we also try not to chase shiny objects. We are mission driven and mission focused, and it would be really easy for us to chase grants that would get us money but not do the basic of what we really need to be doing. So when we look at grants, we really try and make sure that they are with our mission. We were really fortunate with this capital campaign. Nature Conservancy sort of fell into our lap. We had done a USDA market analysis study 8-9 years ago, probably 9 years ago, on the state of the economy and apple crops and what that looked like and the viability of it. And we found that there was strong market potential for orchards still here. And we felt like that we could be doing it in a way that was drought resistant. because of that, a consultant who had been working with Nature Conservancy saw that study, and that's what allowed us to make that connection with Nature Conservancy. They were great to work with. They cared a lot of how we would be treated by being in a partner with them down in rural Colorado, rural Southwest Colorado. You know, we looked at Nature Conservancy. I went back and looked at their information. And what I really liked about them was that they used capitalism to solve problems. You know, they will go and just buy a place to try and preserve it. They have the resources to do that, but it was a good fit. It was a good fit for down here. And as people have gotten to know it, they realize they're not coming in to steal the water from everyone down here. Water's the big concern, right? And they have been a great partner. And then because we could get that sort of support from Nature Conservancy, it made it easier for us to be able to have credibility with like Colorado Water Conservation Board, to go in and look for funding there. And then with DOLA and other sources there that we've been able to match together. One of the great frustrations in rural Colorado, and this is true of rural America, is that it's a lack of opportunities. And it's not that there isn't resources, and it's not that there isn't plenty of really smart people with initiative to do things, but those opportunities have to be provided for. And far too often, organizations can get a little bit of funding for this or a little bit of funding for that, but it's really hard to bundle those together. So we knew that to rebuild the economy, we knew years ago it was going to be about $1 million effort to rebuild the economy. We're over that $1 million now that we've raised. We're close to being done with everything we need for the full build out of what our vision is with the hub property. Not there yet, but we're closer to it. But it's really trying to get people to realize that you have to combine resources if you are going to be synergistic in solving the problems of rural Colorado.
Yeah, and just from an outside perspective, Jude, one of the things I was impressed with what you guys have done is you really outlined your step-by-step process, recognizing that it's really hard to get funding for every step. So it was really easy on our end from the Rural Economic Development Initiative to be like, hey, we can see where this step can use funding, and it's a small fund that we have, but we think of it as catalytic to these bigger projects to then fit in to your bigger vision. And so that's really helpful, I know, from a funder perspective, to be able to see that you know exactly where you're headed and you know exactly where you can plug dollars in when they show up.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat, but I'm going to give a minute for that. And if not, we appreciate everybody's time today. Okay, it looks like we are free. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. A lot of great information today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.